And obviously we're recording the session today for people who can't make it. And if you don't want to be recorded, don't put your camera on or your mic on. You'll still be able to ask us questions through the chat function. Okay, I think we're nearly ready to begin. So, welcome and thank you ever so much for joining us today. My name's Jo Verrant, pronouns she, her, and I'm senior producer for a commissions program called Unlimited, and I'm your chair here today, taking you through the proceedings. Visual description of myself: I'm a 50-year-old, well, 50-plus-year-old white woman, tending towards the plump. I've got blue hair, which is swept up today, feather earrings, and a white shirt. So today's session has been brought to you by Unlimited and The Space. And we've been working together on the Culture in Quarantine commissions, which have been created and are being shown on the BBC. But today we're going to talk in more general terms, not just about that process, but about how artists can produce kick-ass applications. We know that application processes are becoming more accessible to more people, but sadly, the amount of funds available aren't necessarily increasing. So whether we like it or not, those things are becoming more and more competitive. Now, there is work going on behind the scenes generally to really try and improve application processes. I don't know if you know about a scheme called #FixTheForm, but there's a big program at the moment which is all about trying to get people and organizations and funders to fix the form and actually make application processes much more applicable, accessible and welcoming for people. But here we're going to look a bit at the other side. What can you do as artists applying, particularly disabled artists applying, to make your application stand out? So just for context, Culture in Quarantine round 2, the application round that was for disabled artists only, had over 250 applications, and we funded 12 commissions. So that was 5%. So 5% of the people who applied got funded, which meant that 95% didn't. We had somebody, when they booked, said that their application was rejected, and this really put them off applying again. 95% of the people who applied are in that position. So really don't let it put you off applying again. It is a really competitive process. Most of these kind of application processes are. I think the first Culture in Quarantine, which wasn't just aimed at disabled artists, they had over 1,600 applications and funded about 25. So that was under 2% of the people who applied who got funded. Anyway, we can't guarantee that if you follow all the advice today, your next application will get through, but hopefully it will get closer to getting through. So today we're going to give you an insight into what some of the partners connected to Culture in Quarantine think make great applications. And we're going to give you a chance to ask and have answered particular questions. So if you're joining us, fantastic. Please do turn your camera and your mic off so that we can make sure that people can focus on the interpreters and the people who are speaking. We'll be live tweeting through the day. Thank you, Alistair. So please follow We Are Unlimited, which is spelt We Are UNLTD on Twitter. You'll be able to follow that chat. And we've also got visual notes being taken today. Thank you, Roberto. And we'll send those out to people and publish those on our blog once the event has wrapped as well. So keep your camera off until the question and answer sessions. That'll make it easier. If you want to multi-pin the interpreters, let us know. We can make that happen. We are recording it. So yes, you can get a recording afterwards. Put questions in the chat. We'll come to you later on. But for now, let's make a start. Can I ask Stephen, who's the Digital Arts Commissioning Executive from the BBC, to join us on screen? Hi, thanks, Stephen.
Hello, hi, Jo.
First of all, tell us just who you are and give a visual description of yourself.
Sure. Hello. Thank you very much for inviting me this morning. So my name is Stephen James Yeoman. I am the commissioning executive at BBC Arts. I look after projects which are mainly in the digital space, but sometimes that leads into other platforms like television, and of course we consider iPlayer television as well. Visual description, like you, I am in my 50s. I think that's what you said. I'm a white male, and my voice, sorry, it's a little bit croaky today. It's because, and we're all getting used to sort of this, feels like we're emerging out of the pandemic, doesn't it? And I went to an event last night, which had about 500 people there, and which was quite scary, I think, because it's the first time in 18 months I've been to anything like that. But my voice is like this purely through shouting over loud music, for no other reason.
You may be emerging out the pandemic. I'm not going anywhere yet. I'm on the clinically extremely vulnerable list, and I don't trust the government. That's my simple rationale. Anyway, lovely to have you with us today. Now, I know you weren't involved in the selection for this particular round, but can you tell us a bit about what the BBC was kind of looking for within this process, just in very general terms?
I can, yes, and I think if you forgive me, I will stick to general terms. I think because I hope that will be most helpful. It's incredible, those figures that you just gave, and actually, they're quite stark, aren't they? You know, to think that 5% of the applications were successful in round 2 and 2% in round 1. But you said something there which I think is really, really important. Please don't let that put you off. That is so important. For me, when I'm commissioning, there are two core principles, foundations that I think every commission for me rests on, because I work for the BBC. Firstly, it's public money. It's not my money, it's public money that we are using for these commissions. And I think probably, I would imagine, for most people on this call, that's not unfamiliar. It's usually public funds that are being requested. Also, for me, everything we do is about audiences. So we think about audiences at every stage in terms of a commission. And I think that really helps me when you're looking at a number of commissions competing for what is always limited resource. It's always limited resources. I think it's really important to think, well, you know, those two core foundations, it's public money and what is the audience, what the audience going to make of this, and what do we want the audience to make of this piece of work. Would it be helpful if I just went through, for me, what I think are good mnemonics in terms of an application, Jo?
Yes, and also if you explain what that means, because I don't know that word.
Oh, right, okay. So I'm probably using it incorrectly then. It's rules of thumb, I guess. So I think for anything, and you know, again, going back to your numbers, you know, 1,600 applications. There are 1,600 applications in front of you, usually sort of, you know, on a screen. You really, really want an application to be clear, that clarity. These are words that, you know, aren't going to be surprising, but editorial is key. Editorial is absolutely key. So you want that editorial to be compelling and bold and ambitious, of course.
What do you mean by editorial? I do not understand words, and I think quite often, I do understand some words, but I think quite often, particularly with this, we're looking at an arts audience who are suddenly working in a BBC context. So what do you mean by the editorial must be clear?
The idea, as simple as that. What's the idea? What is it that you want to make? What is your idea that you are pitching for funding, for public money for, basically? And you know, you want that idea to be I'll say them again, you know, compelling. You want them to be bold. You want it to be ambitious. You want there to be, it's an awful word, and you'll shout at me again, Joe, but you know, you want a form of talkability. You want somebody to say, oh my gosh, did you see? And if you haven't seen, I really want to share this with you because I really want you to see it. You know, that
language.
Sorry?
It's a whole new language.
Oh, sorry. Well, that's my fault. Apologies.
But no, but it's. I think it's really important that we do unpack these things, because different commissioners will have a list of things that they want, and they may have different words that they use to describe it. So that's really useful. I think one of the other things that was needed for this commission was the timescale was quite short.
Yeah.
From idea through to delivery. So there's something about deliverability, and that's my long word.
Right, so you're making up words now, but that's fine too. So I've written down, I'll see your deliverability and I'll raise you achievability. And I think, you know, for me, achievability is budget. You know, what's the budget that's being offered? And if that is £8,000 in totality, then you're not going to make a 90-minute blockbuster that's going to the Odeon. You know, we should, you know, I mean, obviously I'm taking that to extremes, but I always like to see, and I know it's not always asked for, I like to see a budget. I like to see a sketched out budget, because then you have some confidence that that the idea, the pitch, the editorial can be made. You know, I think also within achievability, you're looking for, you know, what talent are already secured, or what talent would you like to be attached to a project? And I think it's...
And talent means people, yeah?
Talent means people, but that can be, depending on the shape of the commission, that can be in front of or behind the camera, the microphone, the written word, depending on the medium. I think that leads me to my third point, which is another ability, compatibility. So what platform is the work heading to, destined for? So with the Culture in Quarantine 2 applications, for example, there were commissions for in moving image for iPlayer for television, and there was also commissions for audio for radio. So I think, I mean, if you really want to boil all that down, and it sort of takes you back to sort of, I'm old enough to have done O-levels, takes me back to my O-level days. Read the question, basically. What is it that the funder, in this case, the BBC and the Arts Councils and Creative Scotland, what is it that they're looking for? And actually, I mean, it's a really simple thing, isn't it? But, you know, if they're, and I've had this in cases, you know, you're looking for an audio work, and then somebody puts in an application for a podcast series, and it's like, oh, well, that's really interesting, fantastic idea, that's great, but actually, we're looking for something that's going out on Radio 3 at 10:45 for 15 minutes. You know, that's an example. So then, if
I'm going to pause you for a minute while we skip over the interpreters.
Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Keep going. So, yeah, something that fits the criteria.
Fits the criteria. You've said it much better than I did.
But that thing about, because I think quite a lot of applications did come in for ideas that were over the time scale that was specified. You know, I think we'd said, you know, no more than 30 minutes, and there were a number of people who pitched a series.
Yeah. A
single audio work, and again, as you said, people pitched a series of, and that they're great ideas, but they're not for this opportunity.
Absolutely right. And actually, Joe, I think that's really common because, as artists, the artists have a core idea that has maybe been percolating for a while. They really want to get that funded. And here's an opportunity to apply for funding, but it might not be the right shape for that idea. So, of course, then when you've got 1,600 applications, it's not going to progress to a successful application if it's not the right shape. So I guess it's a very simple proposition, but I'm just saying, read the question. What's the core question in terms of that particular commissioning round?
Yeah, and just because you do meet all those criteria, it still doesn't mean that you're going to be the one that gets through, but at least you might get through that first sift. Whereas if you don't meet those kind of criteria, you're not going to make it through that first sift. We asked, I think in this round, we said people had to have some experience. They had to, simply because of the timescale and the platform and those things that you've talked about. But I think we still got a number of people applying with no experience, no track record, and no background material, nothing that we could judge that on.
Well, can I pick up on that point? I think it's okay then to look for that experience in a partner. So, I mean, we've done applications and call outs in the past where we've said, in fact, we're working on a project now for a dance season, which we haven't actually talked publicly much about yet for next year. But as part of that open call, we did say, if you're a dance company that wants to make a short form film, but you don't have those skills, it's, then please put in a joint application. That's fine too, and same with interactive. Same with R&D. So I think it's a really good point. About it goes back to achievability, doesn't it? But if you don't have those skills, then you can look around to see, well, who does, and let's put in a joint bid.
Fantastic. I'm going to leave you there, if that's okay. I'd love you to hang around so that we can, when we do Q&A later, we can bring you back in. But for the moment, and I'm so sorry for picking you up on language and being really forensic in what those things mean. But I think it's a really interesting point that we all have and know different words, and they don't always translate across without us explaining them. Excellent. Okay. See you later then, Stephen. Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask Isabella and Tony from Unlimited to pop on and join me on screen. Brilliant. Hi to both of you. First of all, names, what you do, and quick one-line descriptions, please.
Sure, thanks, Jo. So my name's Isabella Gallego. I'm program manager at Shape, and I work on the Unlimited program. My pronouns are she, her.
Sorry, Isabella, could you go a little bit slower?
I'm going too fast.
You said that really quickly. And you've got quite a long name.
I do,
so,
with
Isabella.
lots of L's. Isabella Tulloch Gallego.
And what was your role, sorry?
I'm program manager at Shape, and I work on the Unlimited program. So just a description of sort of audio description of myself. I'm a 30-year-old white woman, and I've got mid-length blonde hair, and I'm wearing a black top. I've got some sort of brown earrings, and I've got a generally plain pale background behind me. I will pass over to Tony.
Hi everyone, it's nice to be here today. Thank you, Jo, for inviting me. I'm Tony, program support for Unlimited. My pronouns are she, her. I am in my 20s and I'm Nigerian. I have dark brown braids and I'm wearing a black top. And similar to Isabella, I have a white wall and a window beside me.
Fantastic. So I want to ask both of you how particularly disabled artists can give themselves the best possible chance that they can. So I know with this round, Isabella, you were part of coordinating access support for some of these applications, and many funders do that now. So can you tell us a bit about what that actually means in practice?
Yeah, so I supported a little bit with this cultural quarantine round, but I also look after access across our unlimited programme. So generally, I think some of the key, I want to cover some key things, and I think one of them is access funds and support. But also looking at access to work, which I'll come on to in a second. But I think more and more funders and kind of commissioning organisations are creating these access fund pots to support artists essentially when they're applying. And I think quite often these funds are advertised, but sometimes they're not. And sometimes, you know, they might be very limited. But I think it's really important to ask. And this would be covering things like access workers to maybe support you with collecting your thoughts and kind of deciding how they come down on paper, or it might be physically filling in the application form. And I think for us and our last unlimited commission, so this is the full round that we did earlier this year, for transparency, for example, we spent 16,500 on access support. And that was for a variety of artists, for a variety of kind of access. But the other thing I wanted to just mention is access to work. So it's not the easiest thing to kind of apply for. It's a government scheme, but I want to just flag it because I think it's invaluable for so many artists. It's a bit like jumping through hoops to get it, but once you've got it, you can then have it for 3 years and it's much easier to apply for again. So I will ask Carrie, my colleague Harry, to pop some links in the chat. But there's a really handy guide that Disability Arts Online has created with Jess Tom. So I just like to shout about it whenever I can. And we can also just put a link into the kind of government website for that as well. Another thing is just around accessible formats. So it's whether a funder has their kind of guidance in other formats, and then also how to apply in other formats. So for example, we provide information in a multitude of formats, such as things like easy read, large print, audio, and then also things like BSL. And then applying, you might be the format of an online form. Quite often online forms can have a variety of ways to change the accessibility on them, which can be really useful. So you can make them large print or you can use a screen reader. But sometimes those formats just don't work. And so it's worth talking to funders about if there's other ways you can apply. So whether that be maybe audio, or maybe it might be that you want to apply doing a sort of a video, a short video, or just a plain Word document. So I think it's again that thing about having conversations with funders. They're just people at the end of the day that work on these. So it's about having conversations with them.
I wonder how, I suppose for a number of people, and I think we've had this a lot at Unlimited, there are a number of people who go, I don't know if I qualify for getting access support. What's your kind of response to that? If somebody's feeling, we had somebody who when they booked in said, you know, I often miss what the question's asking. You know, I don't see, you know, does that mean somebody should have access support?
I think it depends on yourself and perhaps impairments or access related. So I think it's worth having a conversation with somebody within the kind of funding organisation. I mean, personally, I'm dyslexic, so I know that forms can be really daunting and I would probably want somebody to help me a little bit. And it might be that you only need a few hours support just to kind of wrap your head about where, you know, what things go in what boxes. But yeah, a variety of different impairments and people that might be able to help you are out there. So it's, again, I think it's always good to have honest conversations with people.
Absolutely. And I think it's the same around budgets. We had somebody else who said, you know, that they find budgeting really difficult. And again, if that's access related, if it's to do with dyscalculus or, you know, something like that, then absolutely bring somebody in, get the payment from access to support to help somebody take you through that process. Don't struggle with it on your own.
Yeah, I think one thing is that funders, you know, if they don't offer it, really push them, because legally they're supposed to make reasonable adjustments. So I think it's always best to ask as early as possible, because then it also makes everything easier for everyone you're talking to. So, you know, don't leave it to the last minute, ideally. But yeah, it's conversations. It's about having conversations with funders.
I'm just picking up from the chat that yes, access to work does have, you do have to have what's called a viable business. And there's a lot of debate about that viability, because it doesn't seem to be viable at the level of many artists work at a much lower level than their viability level. But the access to support that Isabella's talking about is not linked to access to work, it's through the funder. And if you start to build up enough successful applications, then you will meet that access to work threshold, and then you'll be able to get that support. So I suppose it's a staged journey through that. And somebody else has just asked that they want the chat conversation in larger print later. Absolutely, we'll be saving the chat, distilling it down. We'll be putting a blog out which condenses some of that, but we can also send it to you verbatim in a larger font too, so don't worry about that. Okay, Tony, over to you. Can I ask you a bit more generally what people can do to kind of improve their chances?
Yeah, I think I've thought about this in personal and I guess working within Unlimited, things that I've picked up, and following on from what Isabella has said. I think assessing your capacity is really important, and it's something that can be easily forgotten. But if you can do it, make sure you use every possible tool you have available, like access support, like access to work if that's an option for you. And I think there's a thing about being honest and kind to yourself throughout. So if you're about to submit an application, prepare yourself for the possible outcomes. I think along with that comes preparation and avoiding last minute. Some cases it's easy to just leave things to the last minute. It's a bit thrilling for some people it's unavoidable. But if you're able to, try to plan and prepare in advance. I think a practical tip from me would be to kind of remove yourself or separate yourself from the application and kind of look at it as like a big picture about how you're going to break it down. Come up with a plan of action on how you will spend the days and your time kind of focused on the application, and then removed from the application, and kind of plan what you will approach first and include breaks from the application process altogether.
If you've just joined us, lovely to see you. If you can put your camera off just so that we can focus on the speakers for the moment, that would be fantastic.
Cool.
So yeah, Tony, how do you, we're just going to have an interpreter swap, so let's do that first. Fantastic. How can people be kind to themselves? How does that work in practice?
I guess there are different ways. I guess it's dependent on the person. Some people might want to meditate, some people might want to like affirm to themselves that, you know, you can be patient, you can take your time, you're doing good. And also it's kind of good to build a support system of people that will support you through applications and have people proofread or look over things for you, and maybe not be by yourself throughout applications. So I think leaning into support is such a useful and helpful thing. And also there's an ocean of resources out there available, from books to podcasts and articles about time management, organizing, budgeting, scheduling, and applications. So I think if you can browse around for what works best for you, that can help and go a long way. There's actually a pretty good resource that I use personally, from the Unlimited website, about 6 steps to making applications better. I think, Harry, if you can share a link in the chat, that might help some people and that might not, but I think browse around and kind of figure out what works for you.
Because prior to working with us, you actually worked as an access support worker for somebody putting in an application.
Yeah, I do love my access support work, and it's just, I guess, having the compassion to support other people, and there are people out there willing to support if needed, and I think asking for it is such an important thing, as Isabella mentioned. You won't know if you don't ask for it. Sometimes it's not easily accessible, so sometimes you just have to be your own, I guess, cheerleader and stand up for yourself.
Out of everything that you've said, I think one of the best things is that thing about separating yourself from the application. Your worth is not that application. If you get it or don't get it is not a judgment on you as an individual. It is simply, it's simply about criteria. It's about the sheer numbers of people involved. You cannot be personally connected to that outcome, but that's so hard to do. It's easy to say, it's so hard to do in practice. Brilliant. Thank you both very much. I'm going to ask you the same. If you can hang around for questions later, that would be fantastic. But if you slip off for now, go and have a cup of tea, whatever, that would be fantastic. And can I ask Faye to come on, who's a relationship manager at Arts Council. And just to explain to everybody, Faye's going to come on and Claire's here too. So Claire's going to be voicing over for Faye. So that explains why Claire's here too. So Faye, tell us a bit about what you do and also a quick visual description of yourself, please.
Hello. So my name is Faye Stewart, and I'm a relationship manager for audience engagement based in the Bristol office, southwest of the Arts Council. Just a visual description. I am white. I am recently 40. I have got blonde curly hair, and I'm currently working in my shed. So behind me there are a lovely gallery of lots of photos and bicycle. My preferred pronouns are he, her and she.
Excellent. So I want to ask you first of all about guidance material. So with any commission opportunity or any funding opportunity, there is usually guidance material, whether it's really short or whether it's absolutely enormous. And I think Arts Council veers on the enormous side of material. Why is that so important?
Yes. I do understand that it can get quite confusing. So the Arts Council have, I would say, maybe 70 different funding programs going on at once. So the reason we have so many guidance notes is because we have specific guidance for each funding stream. But each sort of funding stream, it might be sometimes that we're also working in collaboration. So we have been working with the BBC as well. So we will be, so guidance notes will be kind of based very much on what the Arts Council want, but as well as what maybe the BBC are looking for. So it's different perspectives. So we will have our guidance looking specifically at what the Arts Council are looking for. And I would say it's quite similar to a shopping list. And it doesn't matter if you're going out to a big shop or just a little shop. The guidance will depend on the size of the funding. But it's important for you to know what we are looking for. So we're looking at quality, the production, the genre. So there's lots of things in the shopping list, and the guidance is to support you through your application so that you know what we are looking for in the application and how you can best make the application fit with what we're doing. But again, it's a collaborative piece of work. That's why we have the guidance, so you know what we want. But it's important so that you know what we're looking for.
And I think Stephen was saying the same earlier, that if you want to put in something that doesn't match that criteria, you're not going to get through. If somebody wants to kind of challenge or change the criteria, that's really hard because that's actually what you're assessing the application against.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah,
what if somebody doesn't understand the criteria? What should they do?
So obviously it is important that that guidance is there so that you know if your project's going to fit in with that, and we can't change the guidance. So, you know, first of all, it's about finding out, is this the right funding stream for me? And again, it's sort of useful if you've got all of that evidence there. You might sort of think, actually, we've got a few holes in this, or people might think, actually, I'm not sure that we're the best fit for that. We might not be suitable, and that's fine. Not every funding stream is going to be suitable for everyone. Not every application is going to be, you know, what you want to apply for. We're using the guidance then to help you, and it's great. What we really like is lots of questions. I use the guidance to help me go through all of the applications we get to make sure that we're finding projects that are the best fit.
So questions are a good thing, and funders don't find them annoying or a pain in the arse, anything like that. It's like, if you've got a question, people really want to answer it. People want, you want to give people the best chance.
Yes, absolutely. We want to give you the best chance. And, you know, it's about clarifying things as well. The best thing is, I would say, to sit down and talk to someone about it. It's best if you can get all of your ideas out. The more that you talk, I think the more that you think of things and that you can clarify what it is that you want. Sometimes when you're writing things down, they don't always seem clear to you or to the reader. So having a conversation is the best way to get those ideas out. And at the core of what we're looking for in an application is the idea. That's what we want to know. We want to know what motivates you. We want to know what it is that you want to do. That's what's important. And we want to see that passion and that idea in the application.
Fantastic. So I've got two other questions that I'm going to ask, which came through as people applied to come, or as people booked on, they asked a couple of questions. So somebody said that they're a really small company and they're working kind of project to project, but where do they get the funding to kind of, cover core costs or to help them build an infrastructure? So in terms of Arts Council, what funding would help that?
It depends on the context, really. It depends how long you've been going. What I would suggest is finding space to really step back to see what it is that you want. Are you looking for sustainability for the future? Are you looking to expand? You need that time to pause and actually find out where you're going. What's your plan for the next 5 years? What I would suggest is having a really robust business plan, going through your business plan in detail. What is your company purpose? What is it that you want to achieve? Do you feel comfortable where you are? Is your plan to just expand? It really does depend on what your organization is looking for and what the changes that you want to make. If you can identify what it is that you need, then you know which funding program you need to go for. It could be that it's a project grant. Again, we've got some changes coming into these in November, but it might be something that you want to change internally as an organization. You might need a discussion. You might need a consultant to come in to have a look what's happening within your organization. It might be that you want to do some development work. We have got funding primarily for freelancers, but you may find that you want to do some CPD, something to improve your practice. We also have the Catalyst system, which is about changing infrastructure. If you've been working project to project and you want to stop doing that. But what's really important is that you as an organization has time to stand back and look at the specific things that you want to change in order for you to know which funding streams you need to apply for.
Brilliant. And the other question we were asked in advance was about balancing and how you balance applications in terms of demographics or geography or gender or whatever. So how does balancing work?
Okay, so yeah, you're right. Balancing is a priority of ours. So recently I've just been involved in some panel decisions yesterday. So we will look through each individual application. Then in the end, when we make our decisions, we will be influenced by the balance. We need to make sure that we are balancing things in terms of gender, location, whether it's an individual that we're funding or an organisation. So all of these things will influence our decisions as well. For me, what's important, obviously, we are spending public money. So we want to make sure that we have a broad spread of where we're funding as well. So obviously I cover the Southwest area, but we don't want to just put the money in one geographical area. So we need to make sure that we are funding a vast geographical area as well. And we rely on organisations to collect information about their audience as well. So we know the demographics of the people that you are reaching as well. So that's really important that we have that information too, so that we can make appropriate decisions.
So making sure that's all part of your application is a really important thing. If you've got things that add to or could be part of that balancing kind of criteria, making sure that you highlight them in your application can often be a good idea as well. Thank you ever so much, Faye. I'm going to ask you to do the same. If you turn off for now, but come back when we do our questions later on, that would be fantastic. So that's been brilliant. That's been quite a lot to take in so far. So we're going to have a quick break now for 10 minutes so that we can just pause, get a cup of tea, whatever we need to do. Why not look at one of the successful shorter culture in quarantine commissions? We're going to put a couple into the chat now, ones that are under 10 minutes, so that if you want to fill your break time with art, you've got a couple of the works available to you. So I'm going to ask Harry to do that, and we're going to come back probably at about, we can probably come back at 12, can't we? That would be fantastic. It gives us just over 10 minutes to relax. Please do put any questions that you've got in the chat, because we've got one more guest and then it's over to questions after that. So see you in just over 10 minutes. Hi, welcome back. So we'll kick off again in just a moment or so, but just hope you've had a good break, got everything you need, rested up. So do use the chat, excuse me, do use the chat to start putting any questions in. We'll come to you and see if you want to go, ask your question directly, put your camera on and ask it, or whether you want me to ask it for you. But before that, we've got one person to ask a little bit more of, one more presentation, one more conversation before we open up to chat. So could I ask Rob from the space to join me on camera, please? Hiya. So could you first of all tell us who you are, what you do, and a brief visual description, please?
Of course, yeah. My name is Rob Lindsay. I'm the head of programs for the space based in Birmingham. I'm a man in my early 40s, and I have short dark curly hair and a black and white checked shirt. And my pronouns are him and he.
Fantastic. So you've got I think the really interesting question, really. Where does it all go wrong? What are the most frequent errors that you see in applications? Where are people just getting it wrong and ruling themselves out before they've even started?
Of course. Yeah, and I spoke to a few colleagues as well. There's obviously a panel of us that do our shortlisting. And what's interesting is that the same points kept coming up. The first one was just to communicate as clearly as possible. So although it's fantastic to read an application from someone who is clearly passionate about their idea, and it's wonderful to have context and so forth in an application, please one mistake that we keep seeing is that people aren't making it clear what the project is. Right up top in that application, really make it clear, what is it? What digital art are you pitching? What digital piece, or you know, otherwise it might be a non-digital commissioner, but what is the project? What format's it going to be in? What will the audience see or hear or experience? How long is it? All of these different things. It's also really nice. I know a few people who have already said, you know, it might be that there is something right at that moment that you suddenly realize doesn't fit the criteria of the funder. So just being really, really clear about the facts right up front was a massive one that came up from people. And again, yeah, meeting that criteria. It's really worth considering that most funders will have put a brief out there that explains what they're looking for, that explains what makes that funder different from other funders, what they're there to commission, to provide, to create. And again, the questions on the application form, for the most part, are carefully worded to try and generate the information that the funder needs from applicants in order to shortlist them. So again, it's really, really worth considering what is the question and has your answer answered that question. Even if that means you fill in your answer and then go back to the top of that box or that page or that question or whatever it was, and just reread that question and just make absolutely sure that you have provided the information that they're looking for.
I fell into this recently. We were doing an application at Unlimited and I got so carried away in typing my perfect response.
Yes.
That when somebody looked at it, they went, you know, the response is lovely, beautifully written, fantastic. In the word count, doesn't answer the question.
Yeah, completely. It was really interesting. Someone did say, you know, please proofread your final application before you submit it. And I said, well, that, you know, surely there's going to be kind of typos and so forth. That's understandable. And they said, yeah, it's not about typos. Obviously, make sure that any links work and things like that, but typos are completely understandable. It is that, exactly as you've just said, it's really worth recognizing that for any project, as an artist, you have an unshakable burden of context. You know, your project might be based on an idea that you've had for months or years, or something that has been, you know, swilling around your head for a lifetime. It may be something that you can talk about with great passion at great length, but when you come to complete your application, that familiarity does mean that you may miss key facts. You may jump to the end, you may jump over stages because you're really excited to get to the next bit. Or again, you may forget that key criteria from the brief. It may be that you have missed the answer that the question is asking you. So you proofreading it, or even better still, if you've got someone that can read it for you, it means that person is going to be able to identify the gaps in what you've written that your brain is otherwise filling in, because you already know, you know, you yourself don't have any questions about your own project necessarily, your own creative aims. You know what you want to do. And so, yeah, you might not realize that information's not all there on the page.
It's so hard. It's so hard to particularly when you're writing to time and, you know, all the pressure that comes in, particularly like we were talking about earlier, if you're doing it at the last minute, it's really hard to go back and recognize that you need to redo a section. But absolutely, if somebody can read it afresh and go, do you know what, you might not be answering the question here, it does give you the best chance.
Yeah, completely.
What about the other kind of side of it? Because quite often people are asked for examples of work or additional materials, support materials. Where do people go wrong there?
Again, yeah, if you have anything, if it's a project that you're still developing, it's really useful to see any reference materials that you've got, you know, scripts or scratch tapes or photos or reference images. Again, make sure that you're really pitching the quality of what you're going to do as much as the central creative idea as well. and really make sure that it's relevant as well. We've seen a few people make the mistake of pitching one idea and then including a reference material for something completely unrelated. And sure, it may show a commissioner or a funder that you can deliver a project, but it doesn't necessarily show that you can realize the ideas or the concepts that you're pitching in that instance. Again, it's really worth considering what else that reference material says. So if you are stating in your application that you have a large online following who are keen to see more of your work, there is a kind of built-in audience there, but you're then putting forward as principal references, for example, a YouTube video where the funder can see only 12 people have watched it, that's gonna harm your case rather than help it. So just be aware of things like that as well. Just be aware of what makes something a really strong reference material rather than just sort of additional bits of a conversation,
And presumably at least send people something, because sometimes at Unlimited we have no reference material, no examples of previous work. And from a panel perspective, it's like, well, how do we judge you? We don't have time to go find you on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that you've got that really speaks to the project and helps make the case for shortlisting you is really, really valuable. Again, those sections of those application forms are in there for a reason. And if you use those opportunities in the right way, they can do an awful lot of heavy lifting for you. Yeah.
So what, anything else that kind of comes up where people kind of get it wrong?
Yeah, definitely. I think at the space, obviously a lot of what we're doing is digital and new ways of using technology. And we do often see people have included a sort of digital element or an innovative new element that doesn't quite seem to achieve the aims that they're trying to achieve, or doesn't quite seem to even serve the creative ambition of the artist as well. So this is very, very specific to some of our innovation strands, but a few people on the panel did say, yeah, don't throw tech at a project for the sake of it. Think carefully about what any tech wizardry you're using is going to add to your creative idea, and crucially, how it helps advance you as an artist as well. Is this something, for example, that you're doing in the absence of in-person experiences over lockdown, or is this something that genuinely you want to explore and keep moving forward with?
Yeah, I think at Unlimited, we often ask people to think about, is this an R&D project or is this a fully realized project? How much do you know about what it is you want to create? Because if there are a lot of unanswered questions, then you might be best finding some research and development funds to apply for first, to get some of those answers so that you can then pitch a bigger project. Yeah,
completely. It's really worth being aware of the difference, for example, between a commission and a grant, where one's going to be about the ultimate outputs and the other might be about that research and development time. It's really worth being aware of. Again, look at that criteria, look at what the funder wants to see in an applicant, because they are going to ultimately have a portfolio of commissioned work that they are going to hope demonstrates something to the funding that they've made available. It's worth saying as well that with the funding, it's really helpful to the shortlisting panel if a budget sheet can be as detailed as possible. You don't necessarily have to know all the answers, but sort of miscellaneous clumped together costings can be sort of difficult to unravel and unpick. And at the same time, that budget sheet, any itemization, often can really help fill in gaps in how you're going to deliver this project. If we can see how much time you've got on writers' fees compared to actors' fees or dramaturgists or whatever it might be, again, it really sends real strong messages about the feasibility of the project and specifically how it's going to be delivered. So yeah, don't pass those up as an additional opportunity.
And one of the things we always check in a budget is the artist paying themselves? we exist to ensure that artists, get paid for the work that they do. And I think sometimes people think, oh, well, if I give my time in kind, it will look better. And we always say, no, really, don't do that, because you're undercutting one of your most valuable assets.
Yeah.
If you're not valuing yourself, then how do we value you?
Exactly. And every successful funding application, every successful project that you create, then theoretically makes your case for the next one stronger. If you've got something, you can say, this is what I've done recently. And if every single time you're just not paying yourself, that's unsustainable. That's unfeasible, really. It's recognize your time in those projects, recognize everyone's time in those projects, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think there is an element sometimes as well of people might list collaborators or friends they know who have particular skill sets. And I think it's really worth having really honest conversations with those friends, because they may be supportive of us as artists. They may be supportive of us as collaborators. They may equally feel unable to say, this is actually pushing me slightly out of my comfort zone. This isn't all entirely in my wheelhouse. We get a lot of people who have got who are putting forward potential collaborators for example, filmmaking or videography, whose background is in photography, and it is an overlapping skill set, but they are their own skill sets. At the same time, we've had people who have said this person has experience operating a camera, but that doesn't necessarily mean they've got the same skill set needed to help conduct interviews with your team or whatever it might happen to be. These are all different skill sets. And again, we've seen projects where putting too many elements on one person's shoulders can cause problems further down the line as well. And it's something that we really look out for, just making sure that people are comfortable in the roles that they're in these projects.
And I think do check that those people are actually up for working with you. Yeah. I've definitely been on selection panels where Unlimited has been mentioned as a collaborator when nobody's talked to us at all.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. Make sure that you have got that people are happy with their names being listed and that they're happy to work on that project moving forward as well. I think there is an element too of, particularly if you have a piece that is going to be an online work, you're obviously going to want to demonstrate impact of that. Exactly as Stephen said at the top of the day, audiences are really, really key. And it may be that someone is commissioning for a broadcaster and therefore they're going to be able to establish that route to audience. It may be that something is going to be online and that they are going to take into account what is the route between this fantastic piece of art and the audience that it deserves. A phrase I use a lot is to say that the internet is full of beautiful secrets, fantastic, exciting, insightful, beautiful, empathetic works, and no one knows about them. They're on their undiscovered, unfound. They've not reached their audiences. And one of the large parts that we'll do as a digital commissioner, putting pieces online, is wanting to ensure that there is that route to audience. How are people going to know that this is here? And that might be what a lot of people will say is if they don't have, for example, the online audience themselves, it might be that they're going to build in the support of other people who can promote their work, who can celebrate their work, who can, shout from the rooftops to their own followings about this fantastic piece of work. Again, if that is the approach you're going to take, if that is an element that you want to include in your pitch, it's really worth making sure that you've at least spoken to them and that you've got that buy-in, rather than just assuming that various different companies are all definitely going to promote your work. Have those conversations first.
Fantastic. So I'm going to ask you the same. In fact, I'm going to say, can you stay on screen?
Of
and
course.
Can all our other speakers pop on too? It'll mean there's quite a lot of us. So do make sure you pin the interpreters if you need to. But can I call back everybody? Okay, all popping back on now. We'll find out who's dozed off now or not come back. Brilliant. So we've got a couple of questions already from people so only come on if you've been on the panel for now. So we've got a couple of questions from people who sent them in as they booked on. So I'm going to ask the first one, is it better to apply as an independent artist or as part of a group? So who wants to ask that? What's the benefit from being an independent artist applying to actually pairing up with other people? Okay, Stephen?
I would just say it goes to skills and what skills are needed to deliver the piece of content. And if an independent artist is comfortable, but they're able to deliver that piece of work, the piece of work that's being pitched in its entirety, then that's absolutely fine. If they feel that they need support or whatever reason, then do an application as a group. I don't think there's one answer. There's no one size that fits all in terms of that question. It's a really good question.
Yeah. Anyone else on that one? I mean, I would certainly say to get the hierarchy of who is leading the project really clear. Is it a joint application from a number of different entities, or is somebody leading it and then they're going to contract the other people to deliver certain applications? I think sometimes those things aren't necessarily worked out as somebody applies, and they can lead to kind of problems kind of later on. But I would agree. I don't think there's a right answer. It does depend. If you've not got a very strong track record yet, then potentially coming in as part of a group of people who've potentially got more of a platform than you, or more of an audience than you, or more experience than you, that can often be really helpful in terms of getting started, perhaps. Faye, what about the Arts Council? You balance between individuals and organisations, am I right?
Yes. And again, like Stephen's saying, it does depend on the content and, the full package really, and depends on the activity, whether it's suitable for an individual. Some individuals are really, really strong and can provide everything. But again, it's about kind of what we were saying earlier about having the full overview, absolutely knowing exactly what the project is going to be in the application, having it there to start off with. It could be in some cases that you have an individual lead and then other artists sort of involved as well. Perhaps something that's visual arts, working with musicians. So sometimes it depends on what the collaboration is as well.
Fantastic. We've had another question, which is, how do you find out about call outs, particularly if you experience barriers to endlessly scrolling through social media? So can I ask, the Space, BBC, Arts Council, where do you put out information about kind of call outs?
I'll say for the Space, it's material will always be posted on our website. We'll always do materials going out through that way. Again, there are social media channels and places like that where we will put things. Again, we'll try and do call outs through relevant partners as well. So if something is being done with ACE or with Creative Scotland or whoever it might be, as well through those channels as well. But I mean, I would say nowhere mysterious. It's as you'd expect, the kind of standard sources really. Does that make sense?
We have a newsletter that goes out every month. It only contains ours and maybe some of our partners or organisations that we're linked with. It's not aimed as a listing, but I think Disability Arts Online has a listing. What about the BBC? Where do you put out your call outs, or is it all done secretly?
I loved what Rob said. Nowhere mysterious. I love that. So the BBC will often usually partner with an organisation rather than be putting call outs on its own platforms. But I would add that I think it's often useful to follow social media channels. Like this morning, we have announced details of a project with museums, libraries, archives and galleries. And actually the way we've announced that is by posting on Twitter. So I would say social channels are always worth a follow.
Excellent. Catherine Baker, do you want to come on and ask your question, or do you want me to ask it for you? I'll just see if Catherine appears. I'm going to ask it. Okay. So if an artist is working at a university, do they apply as an individual, or can they apply through the university? Because quite often, if you've got an employment relationship, that means that you have to. I mean, I can answer for Unlimiteds. We wouldn't accept a university application. Our applications have to come from lead artists. So, and also, we don't accept applications from people who are in full or part-time study if the application is linked to their degree. So that's from us, but I don't know how that works with other people. Rob, do you work with universities?
It tends to be similar to what you just said. So it tends to be creative organisations and individual artists as well. Again, it will depend on the individual programme of support. You know, there will be an individual piece of criteria. So it might be that something is focusing on establishments and organisations. It might be one is for independent artists as well. It'll always come down to the individual criteria for the programme, and that information will always be, that's one of the first things you get in the briefs, you know, the eligibility criteria before anything else will be in each individual brief. Yeah.
Okay, this one is another chicken and egg type question. Is it better to pitch with a production company, or to pitch the idea and to figure out the production side if the idea is commissioned? So I'm going to go BBC first on this. So Stephen.
I would say that just be honest in the application. So because I think there is no right or wrong answer with that. Sometimes you want to, and this goes back to what I was talking about, achievability. You want to know that with that funding, the piece of content can be made within budget, within time frame, and for platform. Now, if there's a production company on board already, and you evidence that that's how the piece of work is going to materialize, and evidence it. I think if you don't have that in place, then just say, I would be looking to work with a production company who has the skills, which I don't have.
Yeah, I think that time scale is really key to that. So at Unlimited, we have quite a long time scale for the development of our works, so that can be arranged. We also do an expression of interest, and it might not be fixed at that point. But if we shortlist people, then by the time they submit a full application, they may have worked that out. They know they've got through that first hurdle. Okay, oh, they're coming thick and fast now. There's a question about, don't just push out via Twitter, because that could be discriminatory. And I think everybody said that they also use their websites and their newsletters and their partners, and don't just do it on social media. I think that's really important to remember. Is there an optimum time to get applications in relation to deadlines? Because sometimes you want to spend as much time as possible, but somebody else, and I think Tony mentioned earlier that earlier is better. So Faye, would you advise last minute applications or applications in advance? What's your take on that?
For me, I would say it's kind of to think about your own deadline and then work backwards. You need to allow yourself time to prepare. If it is last minute, in some cases that happens anyway. You might have to be working to a later deadline. But I think it's important for you to be able to have your own deadline, to be able to break things down to do the best application, and look at a timeline, how to manage your project as well. I think that's probably what's more important. In some cases, yeah, we do have last minute contact, and people have these conversations right at the very end of the process anyway. So we are quite flexible.
Again, my personal technique is to always prepare stuff in advance. And recently this was very useful because the week of the application going in, I was in hospital. So it was great to be able to pass it over to somebody else with the bulk of the work having been done. If I'd have left it to the last minute, we wouldn't have been able to submit quite a key application. So again, I think for many of us disabled artists or disabled creatives who have changes in health are part of our lives, then absolutely to work ahead, I think, can really help. Isabella?
Also, I just think if you're working with an access worker or provider, that kind of added time scale of kind of getting them in place. It might be somebody that you've worked with multiple times with before and you have a working relationship with them. But in some cases you might need to find somebody new. So it's making sure that you've built in that so that it's not adding to, it's not making you more worried or stressed about the process. And yeah, kind of giving yourself a false deadline is very useful, I think, for quite a lot of artists, so that they're not leaving it till that last day or last hour, which is quite often the case. But yeah, just thinking about kind of access support that you might be using and some other timescales around that.
And also, if everybody goes at the last minute, then the systems can topple over. I know there is a question about will Grantium ever get more accessible, but I'm not going to burden Faye with that at this point, because that's a huge question that can be answered. Stephen?
Sorry,
Just
Joe,
want to say,
I just missed, sorry, Joe, I just missed what you said to Faye that you wouldn't ask her at the moment.
I'm not going to ask if Grantium is going to get more accessible, because I think that's a huge question that's not right for today. Stephen?
I just wanted to say, if hidden in that question is...
I do have a response, sorry, yeah, I can briefly respond to that.
Oh, sorry.
If you do have issues with Grantium, please contact the Arts Council. We do have access support as well, and we have funding in place for that, specifically for people who need additional support. So I have put some information about access into the chat. So that, please, if you are having problems, please do contact us.
Brilliant, thank you. Stephen?
I was just going to say that if hidden in that question is, does my application have more of a chance if it's submitted early ahead of the deadline, then I would just like to say no. Because if the deadline is midnight on a Sunday and your application arrives at 23:59 on the Saturday, it has an absolute equal chance. So just in case that was actually what was behind that question.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, we're getting near the end now. What we really want to do is to ask everybody today who's come along to help too. So we want your top tips. We want you to kind of really kind of throw those into the chat so that we can compile them at the end and make sure that they're part of the blog that we'll put out, which we'll send to everybody who booked on today, and also will be available to a much wider range of people who haven't as well. So do put your top tips into the chat, but I'm going to ask each of our speakers today for their top tip too. So Stephen, top tip for applying and making a kick-ass application. Short.
Hit the commissioner grab them by the lapels and shake them with the idea. The editorial, the idea is king, but clarity. It goes to what I think all of the panel has been saying today. Just be really clear about what you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve it.
Fantastic. Isabella, your top tip.
I think just remember that funders aren't faceless entities, that there's people behind them. And so you're trying to kind of get to that. And that ask questions if you need something clarified, and ask questions if you need support. They're real people.
Fantastic. Tony, your top tip.
I think mine would be just echoing the fact that there is support and there is access when requested. So it would just be use every tool that's available to you when you can and if you can.
Fantastic. Faye?
Yep, I think again, it's about, kind of looking at the guidance, look at, what you need to do, what's out there. Make sure that what we're looking for is your passion. It's what you want to do. That's what we want to see. So make sure that that's front and center as well.
And Rob?
Yeah, I would simply say commissioners have a brief of their own to deliver a portfolio, a slate of work as well. They're trying to get as many brilliant projects that fit their own criteria. So they will have put as much helpful information in that brief as they possibly can. So just always read the brief and just try and communicate as clearly as possible as to how you meet it. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think if I had one to add, I'd pick up on what Tony said earlier. It's so hard, but don't take it personally. It's not a reflection on you. It is a reflection of the competition that is built in, sadly, to a capitalist society. Showing my northern socialist roots there. And there's some brilliant tips coming in. Try again, fail better, persevere. Really great stuff. So we're going to keep the chat open for a couple of minutes so that you have plenty of time to add your top tips before we end today. But I just want to really thank everybody for coming along today. I hope it was really useful for you. I want to thank all of our Access support workers today and all the Culture in Quarantine funders. So that's BBC, Arts Council of England, Arts Council of Wales, Creative Scotland, and the Arts Council of Northern Ireland. There was a question earlier about what's open to Northern Ireland. And again, I think it does depend on the scheme and the programme and the funder, and it will always be explained within those eligibility criteria if people from Northern Ireland can take part in a scheme. They can some of ours, but not all of ours. So yeah, we'll leave it open for now. There's also an evaluation form that is available. We'd love you to fill that in. That helps us keep offering webinars like this, the sessions like this. And there's a second session coming up too. The space for running a session on creating online content. We'll put a link in the chat to that as well so that you can get that. But apart from that, thanks ever so much for coming along this morning. Thanks to all my speakers for braving the wrath of dissatisfied and unsuccessful applicants, because as Isabella said, we're humans and it really hurts us too when people and projects that we really love don't get through. But yeah, that's it for now. Thanks ever so much for coming. We'll keep it open for about 5 minutes to get your top tips. But apart from that, we'll end here. Thanks ever so much. Bye.